Alright guys, this is station 1. In this station we are going to be practicing multiplying and dividing with zeros. So we're going to practice with zeros, just multiplying by zeros, and then we're going to get into division. So one thing that I want you to remember is that when you multiply, not divide, whenever you multiply, that means that your number gets bigger. So number gets bigger. Then whenever you divide, that means your number gets smaller. So if I'm looking at these multiplication problems, so for example, I'm looking at this one, and my largest number is 6,000, but I'm multiplying, that means that my end answer has to be bigger than this. So whenever we multiply, we're going to pretend that those zeros are not there, and I'm going to take out the 6 and the 7. So 7 times 6 equals what? Well, I know that 7 times 6 is equal to 42. So far I have a little bit of my answer. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to count up how many zeros do I have all together. Because remember, my answer's got to get bigger. I can't have 42 because that's smaller than 6,000. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. So I have to add 5 zeros to my answer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I can go back and add my commas. 1, 2, 3, comma. 1, 2, 3, comma. Well, as you can see, I have a much larger answer. So at least I know that I multiplied correct. So now let's go to the next one. Remember, you're going to ignore the zeros and multiply 6 times 1. Well, 6 times 1, you know, is equal to 6. But then I have all these zeros. How many? Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3 zeros. So that means I need to add 3 zeros to my answer, and I get 6,000. Alright, I want you to do this one. 900 times 80. So you should have multiplied 9 times 8, which is equal to 72. And then you should have went back and counted how many zeros do I have. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So you should have gotten 72,000. Alright, let's look at our next one. Now we have 2 times 1. So 2 times 1 is equal to 2. But then we have 3 zeros and 2 zeros, which gives us a total of 5 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm going to go back and put my commas, and my answer is 200,000. Alright, 6,000 times 10. We know that 6 times 1 is 6, and we have 1 plus 3 zeros, so that gives us 4 zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, comma. So I have 60,000. Alright, these are easy. This one's just 8 times 6. Well, I know that 8 times 6 is 48. And then I have 2 zeros connected to it. 1, 2. Well, now I have 7 times 5. 7 times 5 is 35. And then I have 2 zeros connecting to it. 1, 2. I want you to do this one. You should have done 9 times 4, which is equal to 36. And then you should have added 1, 2, 3 zeros. 1, 2, 3 zeros and got 36,000. Alright, now with division. So we notice multiplication, our number gets bigger, but with division, our number gets smaller. So remember our trick with division. If our number has to get smaller, that means that it cannot be any bigger than your larger number. So whenever you divide, you take the number you are dividing by and you take those zeros out. So if I have 2 zeros in the number I'm dividing, I'm going to take those out. And if I take 2 out here, I get to take 2 out here. So now I'm left with 25 divided by 5. Well, what is 25 divided by 5? I can also write that as 5 times what equals 25. Well, I know that 5 times 5 equals 25. So my answer here is 5. Let's look at this one. We're dividing by 7,000. So in 7,000 there's 1, 2, 3 zeros. So that means I get to take away 3 zeros over here. 1, 2, 3. So now I'm left with 35 divided by 7. I can also say 7 times what equals 35. Well, here again, I know that 7 times 5 gives me 35. So 35 divided by 7 equals 5. Alright, let's look at this one now. In this problem, I'm dividing by 700, and there's 2 zeros. So I see 1, 2. If I take off 2 here, then that means I get to take off 2 here. Well, when I do that, I still have an extra 0, but I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to pull out this number and this number. I have 14 divided by 7 equals what? Well, I know that I can also ask myself 7 times what equals 14. I know that 7 times 2 equals 14. So that means that 14 divided by 7 is equal to 2. However, I cannot forget about the 0. So I have to add it to my answer. So now this answer becomes 2 and another 0, which is 20. Alright, I want you to do this problem. You should have realized that in the number you're dividing, you have 1 0 that you can take away or take off. So that means you can take off the 0 over here. So now you have 18 divided by 6 equals, or 6 times what equals 18? Well, I know, and you should have known, that 6 times 3 equals 18. So 18 divided by 6 is equal to 3. So you may be asking, well, Ms. Smith, why are we keeping this a 3, but over here we went and made this a 20? Well, that's because, remember, we had an extra 0 over here that we had to add to our answer. Here, when we took off those zeros, we don't have any extra zeros, so our answer would just be 3. And so we can write that here if you want. Alright, let's look at this one. I want you to do this one now by yourself. So you should have noticed that you are dividing by 60. So when you divide, your number gets smaller, so we're going to take off some zeros. If I take 1 off here, I'm going to take 1 off here, but I still have an extra 0. So I'm going to pull out these numbers. 12 divided by 6 equals what? Or 6 times what equals 12? Well, you should know that 6 times 2 equals 12. So 12 divided by 6 is equal to 2. So I know that my answer is going to have a 2, but let me check and see if I have any zeros. I do. I have 1 extra 0. So that means I have to add it to my answer. So your answer should have been 20. Alright, let's look at this one. We are dividing by 600. So remember, when you divide, your number gets small. So we're going to take off these 2 zeros, which means we get to take off these 2 zeros. So now we're left with an extra 0. So I know my answer is going to have an extra 0. And we're going to look at 48 divided by 6. Or you could also write that as 6 times what equals 48. 6 times 8 equals 48. So 48 divided by 6 is equal to 8. So up here, because we had that extra 0, our answer is actually 80. Because this is 480 divided by 6. And the last one. This one should be easy peasy. We have 2 zeros that we're dividing by. So if we take off 2, we take off 2 over here. So now we have 5 divided by 5 equals something. Or you could say 5 times what equals 5? Well, your answer would simply be 1. So I'm going to write 1, and I don't have any other extra zeros. So my final answer is just 1. Alright, get started on your independent.